What you're describing is why I love learning strategies so much, is that they're professional strategies, they're leadership strategies, they're executive strategies.
Hi, friends, and welcome to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I'm your host, Christy Keating. In this podcast, we talk about it all, our parenting, our partnering, and our professional lives, because they are all a part of us, and we were never meant to do this alone. Welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of the Heartful Parent Podcast. I am really excited to introduce you to today's guest. You know, I have had the phenomenal privilege of just having so many beautiful souls, wonderful people on the podcast who are doing work that is centered, like that their why is making the world a better place for our kids and our families, right? And our professionals, and that, you know, it's really about building a more heartful world. And I am so grateful for that, because there isn't a single guest that I've had on here who I didn't feel like met that. And today's guest it's like she meets that in spades and then some. There's just something really special about this person who I'm about to introduce you to. And you'll hear toward the end of today's podcast sort of how I was connected with her. I did not know her before she showed up to be on the podcast. You know, I invited her to come based on what I had learned about her work, and had never met her before. And there was just this instant connection and chemistry. And I just really enjoyed every second of our conversation and felt like I learned so much from her. I mean, it kind of blows my mind. You know, having just done the interview with her, what I'm walking away with and what I'm going to take into my own family is exponentially more than I probably walk away with most of my guests, given that I'm in the same space as many of them. And this guest works in a different space that's adjacent, obviously, to what I do, but it's not the same space. So let me tell you who this is, who I'm about to introduce you to. So her name is Dr. Deena Kara Shaffer, and she is the founder and CEO of Awakened Learning. She offers transformative learning strategy support for students, parents, and leaders. And as you'll hear, like, this really, it starts out about students, and it becomes about parents and leaders as well, in a really big way. Deena is also an adjunct faculty at Toronto Metropolitan University. She's a Canadian, and she teaches the sought-out Learning and Happiness course. She is a TEDx speaker and the best-selling author of Feel Good Learning. She's also the co-founder of the now international Thriving in Action Academic Resilience Intervention, the co-author of Thriving in the Classroom, and the two-term past president of the Learning Specialists Association of Canada. Deena is an enthusiastic, and that will come ringing through, an enthusiastic change maker in teaching and learning. She holds a doctorate in holistic learning strategies, is a trained yoga and mindfulness meditation teacher, is a published poet, and is also a sought-out keynote speaker on well learning and leading. She's also the author of the book Raising Well Learners, and the accompanying workbook that just came out called Feel Good Learning, an Academic Reflection Journal. So you can find her in lots of different places. She's got tons and tons and tons of resources on her website. And I think what I love too is that although she knows all this stuff about learning and academics, her ideal day is spent outside getting muddy with her daughters, to keep it real and to keep it human. If you have a student anywhere between elementary school and college or university, you will learn something from this conversation. The strategies that she talks about are really applicable across the ages without exaggeration. And I think that's so cool. So without further ado, let me introduce you to my colleague and my new friend, Dr. Deena Kara Shaffer. Deena, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here, and it's not just because we're matchy matchy.
I know. Like we showed up here wearing the same. Well, this is my favorite color, so I love that you're wearing it as well. It's emerald green for anyone who's not watching this but is listening. And we just had a lovely conversation before we hit record, but we're going to dive in. I want to start with, obviously people have heard me read your professional bio, but let's get a little bit more personal. I'd love to just hear a bit about your journey and how you landed in this space of supporting learners and learning strategies and like why this?
Oh, I mean, maybe that's the loveliest question of all. So, my starting place, very genuinely to you, is gratitude. Thank you. I mean, I began that off air too, with the gift and the generosity of spirit to have me here. And then to your listeners who are choosing to spend their minutes with you and with us in this way. So, a very felt sense of appreciation. And why do I do this thing called learning strategies? So, it's informed by the earliest part of my career as a high school teacher, where I was exclusively supporting teaching students who are having the toughest time of things, learning disabilities, ADHD, mental health issues, and addiction, and what it meant to be a teacher alongside that, the ways that I could be helpful. And what I picked up there was such a clear reflection back of what I'm very bad at and what I'm quite good at. And there wasn't even a job title associated with that. But what I was kind of gleaning was I'm very bad at teaching the historical context of a novel. But what I was good at, kind of sharing strategies to read this book or that book. And if a learner found a particular text boring or dense, that's what was gripping to me. So I didn't have language for it then, but like something was brewing. I was an educator, I was a teacher. I really had an empathic stance. That was what was sort of face forward. And it was about how to give access to learners to the thing we were trying to learn, not so much kind of like being on stage and totally effusive teaching this like long, intricate, war context and history to a book. I'm like, oh, I'm so bad at that. And I also taught internationally. So I'm located in Toronto, Canada, and I taught internationally in Valencia, Spain. And so cross-cultural understandings of learning, what counted as important, what counted as plagiarism, the priorities in learning. I was so interested in all of that. And then keep going. I wound up being a learning strategist, the sole learning strategist on a campus here in Toronto for students with disabilities, acquired brain injury, students who had cancer, and the medication was impacting their memory. And that's where it came together. Oh, there's this thing that you can do with students. You can kind of MacGyver and co-create strategies that can help any learner, that can help every learner with whatever it is they're studying, mechanical engineering or dance or midwifery or chemistry. It didn't actually matter. We didn't get hung up on the subject. There was this richness underneath, and then I fell in love. That's it. That I was done. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is an act of service. It is my best way of being an educator. And there is an alchemy that can happen between educator and student when the work is learning strategies, the work of how to help a student, any age, any stage, any subject, learn how to learn. It is transformative, it is game changing, and it's beautiful.
I mean, I'm like, as I listen to you talk, the enthusiasm and the love and the passion just kind of is oozing out of you. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, I want more of that. Not just the passion, but also the topic itself. As you and I were sharing before we hit record on this interview, I am a parent. I've got a 15-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old daughter. And this idea of helping them learn how to learn and then find joy in what they're learning. Like that just lights me up, especially as a lifelong learner myself, right? That to have them feel like they had strategies to approach challenging subjects. And I have to imagine that for the parents listening right now and the educators listening, because there's overlap there, right? That just even being presented with the idea that there's ways to support the skill of learning and not just the subject itself is really exciting, right? Because, like, as I think about my daughter, she's taking classes that I know nothing about, right? Or I remember nothing about. She's taking chemistry, which was a real struggle for me. And I probably took 35 years ago, right? I can't help her learn chemistry, but maybe I can help her learn how to learn chemistry.
You got it. Like that's the magic, right? That's the secret sauce. I know I don't denigrate tutoring at all. Filling in content gaps or having any kind of educator explain with different metaphors and different examples specific topics, that can be very helpful. But then there's this whole other area that is not very well explored, or really, I should say, it's explored in small academic pockets. People who are really jazzed and publishing, researching on learning science, on cognitive psych, on education psychology, but it doesn't translate. It's not showing up in teacher education. It's definitely not showing up in the classroom or in texts. So what happens is a student begins to form an identity around like, oh, well, then I'm just not a chemistry person. I just can't do chemistry.
Mhm.
Or they work with a tutor, so well-meaning, the parents are organizing this, but then there's a like lurching week to week trying to get through chemistry homework. But the underneath pieces of time management or even relating to time, how do I prioritize? It's like it just stays with a subject instead of transferring across the other subjects. Because there are bigger issues than just, do I understand this particular topic in chem? There is, how do I study efficiently so I am confident and ready, not sleepless or panicked? How am I efficient with my time? What is a useful way to try to prepare and remember things towards a chemistry test as any test? And that's the stuff that I find myself absolutely consumed by because it is actually learning strategies. They're where academic performance, that confidence piece, grades piece, motivation, engagement, it's where it meets mental health before things go wrong. And
Mhm.
it's where justice and equity meet because some kids are very lucky and they have parents who can share some strategies that worked great. But learning strategies take the luck out of it. They lay bare many, many different ways to tackle an essay if you have writer's block, time management if you have 4 exams or 4 assessments due on the same day. It's how you take a test. And if you're beginning to feel a little bit panicky, that's what learning strategies are. And I just want to, I'm glad you feel that enthusiasm. It's so genuine. I want to sing it from the rooftops.
Yeah. Again, as I'm hearing you talk, I'm like, I have both of your books, which we'll just mention briefly, which is Feel Good Learning and Raising Well Learners, which is your new one. Haven't read them cover to cover yet, have read bits and pieces, and I find myself just wanting to know more. So you've just done a beautiful job of explaining learning strategies are these things that can translate across topic area. Can we get a little more specific or granular about like what do we mean? What are some examples of actual learning strategies?
Yeah. So on the one hand, I kind of want to phrase, like some people will say learning strategies are metacognition, learning about learning. And I'm like, that's kind of Yawnsville. It's sort of boring. And I admit, if you put learning and strategies beside each other, it is often not the most gripping title. It's not the most gripping job title. And yet the work that it does with a learner is absolutely gripping. So I've started calling it the kind of bucket of Well, it's where ADHD coaching and executive function coaching meets therapeutic life coaching session, but it isn't therapy. And it's like tutoring plus. And then parents will start nodding their head like, oh, it's like the sort of magic of all these other things when you put them together. And so what you would find in a learning strategy one-on-one session, or when I do, small group parent sessions, or when I teach at the Imagining Professor here in Toronto. And when I teach the big, like 200 student learning strategies course, one of students' favorite things is to talk about time. They never feel like there's enough. They always feel pressed for it. There are way too many things to do. And the to-do list is insufficient. Why? Like the to-do list is never ending. It is fundamentally unranked. You write all the things down, but you could have on there like, email professor and the word studying and write capstone paper. They could all show up as if they were equal items. They are not equal items. They have different levels of complexity and time required. So, one of the very best strategies for time management, and there are many, and I want to sort of unpack the word management, but for simplicity, let's go find time management, even though we can't manage time at all.
Right.
We are certainly not supervising or bossing time around. But when we're talking about task to time alignment and how we do that, it's the notion of chunking, which is born out of ADHD strategy world. It's beautiful for all learners. And it's simply the idea of how do we take a big thing and break it down into smaller bits. And in breaking something down into smaller bits, we make it more humane and doable. More than that, we make it startable and then we make it sustainable. I'm not interested in co-creating, a study plan with a learner that's like down to the 15-minute segment and has them up all night and, rereading every single page of their textbook 5 times. It's not the direction we want to go in. Tell me one parent who isn't using the word burnout right now for themselves. Those seeds
Right.
are already planted for our learners, and I think we're hoping for something different and better. What would it mean for them? Yes, to be wildly successful and well and inner resourced and able to cope. So that's, I think, the thing we're longing for our children, for our students, and learning strategies are such an important part of that. They make transparent a kind of hidden curriculum, the assumption that I'm a teacher and I'm going to assign a very, again, well-meaning, I'm going to assign a deadline. I'm going to give a due date. How on earth does a learner know how to get from the day that something is assigned to the date of submission, to handing that piece in when there's also 5 or 15 other things to hand in and in the full context of their life and the richness of their life, family obligations, extra or co-curriculars, maybe there's work or volunteer. I mean, there are too many layers there to not actually show the different ways, the different constellations of how to get that work done in a way that isn't borrowing from sleep or mental health or their social life, which is so important, or their family life, which is critically important. And so that's a good deal of what learning strategies do.
I mean, everything you just said resonates with me so strongly. We are recording this in December, so it's like the holiday season, right? And my husband and I, over the years, have we've started a bunch of different sort of holiday traditions and things that we like to do with our kids throughout the month. And this year, as we were sitting down and kind of mapping out the month and planning, like, what are we going to do when, we both looked at each other and we were like, oh, it's hard to fit it all in because we don't feel like we can do things on weeknights because my teenager is so caught up, bogged down, like both, engrossed with trying to get all of the things done, to have a social life, to have a, romantic partner. Like, right, we're in the early dating stages. And then homework, which is not an insubstantial amount. So, when we think about that, like as you're working with families, and yeah, I love that you said that we can't really manage time. And yet we keep trying. We keep trying. My calendar would tell you that I'm trying. How do we move from a recognition of that into some actual, strategies that help those kids and maybe even in the process help us move from, I've got all these things. I've got the list, as you said, the non-prioritized list where everything seems to be of equal importance and equal time into here's how I move through my day and get it done.
I mean, what a kind and relatable question you've just asked. I would love to know if any listener, if any person isn't wrestling with the same thing. It's all of our lives. It's all of our lives in middle age, in our professions, in parenting. It's in our kids' lives. They are mirror images. So I love your question for the grown-ups. I love your question for the not yet grown-ups, for the learners along the way, because they're cousin to each other. So, and it's not a surprise to me, and it's part of why I'm so committed to sharing learning strategies to parents. I'm thinking back when I used to work for the Downtown University's Accessibility Center, I would run orientation, kind of acclimation programs for students who are entering their first year, a massive transition and rite of passage. And I would, mostly focus on student orientation. But I would invite the parents of the students with disabilities to come in, and I would share with them a couple study strategies, a couple time management strategies, and they would be on the edge of their seats. Number one, they would say, I wish I knew this when I was a student. Number two, they say, it's going to be really helpful to my kid. But lastly, they would say, this is also going to be so helpful in the work world. Like if you teach note taking, it's no different than taking minutes professionally. So I
Mhm.
love the question because inherent in that is like, how do we help our kids and also ourselves? Because there is a shared conundrum. There really is a shared conundrum,
Yeah.
which is,
Yeah.
gosh, there's a whole lot to do that we have to do. And there's also a whole lot that we want to do because we are ambitious and alive and creative. And we have to take care of ourselves so that we are like these beings who can keep going. So it's not an unmessy question, but I love that you're including the full ecosystem. That's the whole point, is it's for learners and it's for parents. And it's no wonder that it also feels good for parents. So let's just take studying as an example. So we're imagining your daughter and she has this very, very, full life, which is great. We really don't want to undermine the social piece because we know that isolation not only is so painful in so many different ways and has so many impacts, mental health, but also there is a direct connection between loneliness and GPA. And in fact, I mean, gosh, who is it? Vivek, who talks about loneliness as a pandemic,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Our
So
our US Surgeon General.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So thank goodness it's being spoken about. And thank goodness your daughter and hopefully many of your listeners' kiddos have, rich, full lives that are part of the mix. But oh goodness, there's a, midterm next week they have to study for. How are we
Right.
going to do it all? How are we going to do it all? That's all of our questions. Well, okay. So learning strategies for that are, how do students normally study? I'd love to ask you, how do you think most students, say high school and post-secondary, do studying? What does studying mean to them? How does it show up to them for them?
Oh goodness, this is such a good question because I've watched my daughter and tried to figure out like what is it that she is
What are you
doing,
doing in there?
right? What is happening? And I remember like the way that and even now when I'm learning new things, like the way that I sort of study. So here's what I see. And my poor kid is the guinea pig here, but I see her highlight things, right?
Yes.
And in fact, she wanted to have 27 different colors of highlighters so that she could, you know, change out the color and not get bored with it. But as I see it, having gone through law school, like I did do highlighting, but I tried to really pick out sort of the key like things. And like what I see from her is just highlighting the entire text, right? And maybe using that as a way to stay on track reading it. I don't fully know. I hate to use the word forced, but I have practically forced her to make flashcards to study Spanish because I'm like, you have to have some way to get those words in your brain. And then she like seems to just go back and read over her notes in the hopes that reading those things will go into her brain. I'm not sure she has any consistent or terribly effective strategies. She's made it work. She's made it work through sort of muscling her way through it. But I think if I were to put myself into her brain right now, it feels a little willy-nilly, a little like random as to what she does on any given moment. And there's not a lot of consistency.
Yeah. What you're describing is what, I mean, just shy of 100% of all students I work with. I mean, thousands of students do. And it's because we don't teach how to study. We assign a test date for sure. We don't share how to get there and how to get there in the context of a life. So highlighting and rereading notes and rewriting notes so they're beautiful and pristine and polished and gorgeous and organized is so sadly not studying. And you're right, some students can muscle their way until they can't,
Yeah.
until that doesn't work, until the test gets more complicated, the questions get more complicated, the amount they have to retain, their natural gifts or affinity for the material, when that fails, or when they have multiple highly complex courses. So I want this to be taught starting in, grade 5. What is studying? Studying is repetition. It is questions. So we think about what a test is. A test will never ask us to highlight anything or to reread anything. That's not what we're being asked to do on the date of a test or exam. And I'm not picking on your daughter at all. I already adore your daughter. I've never met her, and I'm rooting for her all the way. And it is what every student does until
Yeah.
someone says you don't have to do it. Because even if they're doing okay marks wise, that comes at a very high cost. The high cost is time. Often, if students are rewriting their notes or rereading, that's very, very inefficient. So they don't get a real sense of mastery or confidence. And it takes a long time if you're rereading everything or rewriting everything. So then we're borrowing from our sleep. So the first thing is we want to do what we do on a test, which is solve problems. So the very best strategy for studying is practice questions, is we practice questions. Here's what students, if they do use practice questions, here's what they'll do. They will take a mock or practice exam right before the day of the test. Like, okay,
Mhm.
I've done all my reading and my highlighting, I'm ready. But then they find out there's a whole bunch of stuff they don't know. Luckily, they have the textbook and their notes and teacher slide decks. We want to flip that. We want to start with any mock exam or practice exam. So the necessary question has to be, but what if my teacher doesn't give our kid the practice exam? Well, the beauty of AI, ethical use of AI. If you write in right now, grade 10, the school district you're in, the specific subject area, the types of questions, multiple choice, short answer, long answer, it will within milliseconds give you a practice test. Of course, you want to ask your teacher, and of course, we're hoping that educators everywhere are on board with practice. But I always like having plan B, plan C, plan D. So if a teacher doesn't provide that, there is no more ethical use of AI than I'm not asking for the answers. I just want the test. And so a student takes the test and they realize, oh, I don't at all remember this. I do kind of remember that. And I feel a bit shaky on this other area. Great, self-diagnostic. If from there they studied either every day, half an hour, 45 minutes, or every other day for 10 days, they would ace that chemistry exam. We want less time, more efficient, and doing the thing that they're going to be asked to do, which is practicing questions. I think about your daughter, lovely romantic partner, friendship. We want studying to come at the start of an evening's worth of homework. Here's what usually happens. Studying, because it's left undefined, is going to be on that to-do list. And because it's not like tomorrow, all the other homework will come first. wants to start studying at 9 o'clock at night?
Not
That's a
me.
nightmare. That's a nightmare. That is a nightmare, and it won't work very well. So what we do instead is go, oh, that's a really undesirable task, but I'm going to really clearly define what I'm going to do. 20 practice questions on this particular chemistry topic or chapter, which I've already identified feels a bit shaky because I took that, really nice self-diagnostic test. And then that's it. I studied. And maybe I did that for 35 minutes. That's studying. I was
Wow.
right. I was awake and alert and I was focused and I targeted and then I moved on. Cross that off your to-do list. Mm-hmm.
Which is a good old dopamine hit, right? When you get to cross something off that list. Okay, like that using AI in that way is something I've never even considered, contemplated. Like, I'll admit like AI is not something I feel super adept at. And so using it in that way just is kind of mind blowing to me. And using and giving that to my kid as a tool, as you said, a really ethical tool. Okay. In your book, you shared another AI strategy that just blew my mind that I had to share with my daughter immediately, which is the use of assignment calculators. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because this did not exist when I was in college or in law school.
Mm-hmm. There really isn't one student when they encounter an assignment calculator who doesn't say, ugh, I wish that I had met this tool before. And so, for those folks listening who are like, yeah, yeah, I know what that is, I just want to differentiate. It's not a grade calculator, like the what do I need to get in order to pass this class kind of grade calculator. So, if you were to type into grandmother Google right now, assignment calculator, a bunch would come up. And they're all based, I think, on a, core algorithm. The ones that I like the most, and I have no affiliation, I'm not a sponsored human, I'm not in partnership with these places, they're just from use. I really like one from the University of Toronto Scarborough campus. So there are three campuses at that university, and that just happens to be the one where they've done this. And when you type that in, you can write assignment calculator, assignment planner, or assignment scheduler. It's all the same thing. And what you will find is this like unremarkable, unbeautiful, really very little design beauty, but beautifully riveting tool. You write in your start date. Now, for parents of students or for students who are listening, that doesn't mean the dates that something is assigned. You could be assigned something today and you are volunteering or working or caregiving or have athletic practice or any number of things, a dentist appointment, and you cannot actually start today. So you begin by writing in a realistic start date. This is so important. Like this is what makes this work holistic, and we're not machines. And it's like an awake, reasonable, sustainable approach and relationship with time. So you write in the actual date you can begin. So say that is tomorrow. So you write in the real date of beginning. Then you see that there's a place to write in the due date. Now, you could write in the due date, but what if you are a learner who struggles with depression or anxiety or an injury or illness that is prone to flaring, but you don't really know when?
Mhm.
Or you have a learner who really wrestles with procrastination and really like who doesn't?
Yeah.
Or perfectionism is alive. So in any of those instances, make the due date, the date of submission of handing it in, 3 or 4 days earlier. Not as a lie to yourself. You're not tricking yourself. You're actually being really awake and honest and saying, there's a real chance that I need a little extra time. It could just be for a learner who never hands in polished work. Like it is always half-assed and rushed. And maybe that learner is really sick of getting the same feedback over and over again about like, you don't know how to cite properly, or your introduction has all of these grammatical errors. And maybe that learner is like, you know what, I don't need to hand the same kind of work in for the 15th time. Okay,
Mhm.
so you write in a due date that honors the learner, like the reality of their lives. So a real start date, a real end date, and then you just choose the closest type of assignment. Now, UTSC, University of Toronto Scarborough campus, has a lot of different ones. It could be a podcast assignment, a reflection, a response, and a research essay. You just choose the one that's closest. And, learners are known for their capacity to push back. So they might say to you, yeah, yeah, mom, yeah, yeah, dad, I don't see any of my assignment types here. Please don't let them get away with it. You just need the closest one because it's really not in the specificity of the assignment. Click on the closest one, and then you just hit the word calculate. And the most remarkable, wondrous thing happens. It has done project management for you. That's all time or task management is. It's just smaller version of project management. And so you will see then step by step a broken down how to get from A to Z subtasked approach to the assignment. And when I teach live, my learning and happiness course live, you actually will hear a gasp in the room. You will hear like, yes, it did the thinking work. It's not even the thinking work. It did the overwhelm work for you. Why don't students start? Because they're immobilized with where to begin.
Yeah. Yep.
Why are students struggling with burnout? Because there is no clear start or end to their task. If you wrote down write essay in your agenda or your online calendar, well, what are you supposed to do with that? Like write the whole essay tonight, start the essay, write 100 words, write a couple of paragraphs. And any type of writing, it can be a lab report, it can be, annotated bibliography, it doesn't matter. The assignment calculator gives us a more easeful, kind way to begin and a very clear boundary of what is my task? What is my portion tonight? That way, I'm not a machine. I don't have to like work until I drop. That's usually students' approach. Well, I'm just going to work until I can't anymore, or I'm going to
Yep.
work until I have used up all the available time. But that's Parkinson's law. Like the work is going to expand to fill the time to do it in. And if we use all 4 hours, but the 4 hours were spent on like developing an outline for a 500-word essay, that we've run ourselves into a ground, been really inefficient with our time. We've used up all the available time, but not to resource ourselves to keep going. So I love the assignment calculator so much. And you will also notice on this particular one, I find this so sweet, is that there is a little toggle at the very top, and it's called step percentage. And you ask your learner, and any educator who's listening will really know this. Have you ever accidentally spent a disproportionate amount of time on one aspect of the assignment, like research? Have you ever spent, I don't know, 50% of your time gathering online articles only to back yourself into a corner with not enough time to read, understand, critically analyze, and then write about it, and then edit your work? That's like every hand will go up in the room if you ask that in a classroom.
Yep. Yep.
By toggling percentage, it will show you spend 5% of your time understanding the assignment. Spend 10% developing an outline. Spend 12% gathering your sources. And over time, you begin to internalize like, oh, if I'm spending 5 hours on understanding my assignment, that must mean how many dozens of hours am I then necessarily like implying I'm going to spend towards the rest of the assignment? Is a
Yep.
really important lesson for students when they don't yet know proportion.
Okay. First of all, I love this. I'm like so excited about it. When I first read about it in your book, I actually did exactly what you described. I Googled, came up with, I mean, countless options. I don't even know the one I chose. I just picked the one at the top of the Google thing. And I pretended I was my daughter and she's in a film studies class. And I pretended I had a paper, like a comparative paper to write about two films. And this particular assignment calculator wanted like the title of the assignment. So I put in a start date, a due date that, was before the due date. I mean, I was making it all up as I went. And then the calculate steps, and my jaw fell on the floor. I was like, oh my God, this is nothing short of amazing. And this didn't occur to me at the time, but as you were talking just now, so I work with a business coach sometimes, and we were talking about like doing presentations, and I was telling her like how much time I would spend doing it. And she's like, that is insane. You're spending way too much time doing X, Y, or Z.
Mm.
I'm like, I could probably use the assignment calculator myself and toggle that little percentage thing on to help me put better boundaries around, what I'm doing as a grown-up who theoretically is supposed to know how to do this, but was also never really taught how to do this.
I mean, what you're describing is why I love learning strategies so much, is that they're professional strategies, they're leadership strategies, they're executive strategies. Like
Yeah.
the number of, clients that I've had who are running their own companies, it's not different. Our relationship with time, being in flow and setting ourselves up for optimal performance, remembering things, being succinct when we are writing, being able to listen with attention and get the most out of when we are focused when somebody is speaking. That happens in the classroom, and it happens as a parent, and it happens as a professional.
Yeah.
For students, I especially find this heartening for students who might encounter this work and they're in their final year before graduating college or university. And they'll say, like, oh, I wish I'd found this before. But the reassurance is, don't worry. Task and time management is going to be with you for a long time. So
Yes,
don't worry. You're going to put this into practice literally every day for the rest of your life. So we got you.
totally. And I'm like, maybe I shouldn't say this out loud because I should create it or have my husband, who's a programmer, create it. But I'm almost like, I need the same thing for like organizing the bedroom, like, or the bathroom or the kitchen pantry or whatever. Like, I need a
Yeah.
home organizing assignment calculator.
Well, I will tell you that there is one.
Oh, damn. Damn. Okay, but
There is
good.
one.
But that's good.
So, I mean, you can make it better. You would make it more beautiful, but there is one. So there might be some folks who are like, I really like the sound of that, but that doesn't really fit my context or my needs. If you grandmother Google or your preferred search engine, Magic To Do. Magic To Do is the same principle, but not within the confines of the academic. It has nothing to do with the scholastic world. I mean, you could write a 1,500 word, whatever, history paper, but you
Yeah.
could also say, spring clean my house. So maybe spring clean my house for a student. I mean, clean my room, clean my dorm room. They might be overwhelmed at that. And if you wrote in, you could do it right now. It'd be so fun if you did it
Yeah.
live. Want to do it live? Do you want
Yeah.
to do it
Let's
right
do
now?
it live.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Grandma Google Magic To Do. And the
Okay.
website that will come up is such an absurd name. It's called Goblin Tools.
Okay. That's what popped up first.
Perfect.
Yep.
Click
Okay.
on that. And I'm going to try to remember this. I'm not going to do it with you. I don't want to like crash Magic To Do.
Yeah.
So first what you'll see,
Deena,
yeah,
wait, you know what I'm going to do?
yeah,
Because some people will be watching this
yeah,
on YouTube.
yeah.
I'm going to share my screen.
Share your screen. This is so fun. Oh my gosh, we're making the magic happen in
W-
real time right now.
We are. Okay.
Very first thing you have to notice is the
Yep.
tagline. So Magic To Do, breaking things down so you don't,
I
right?
love it.
So you don't
Yes.
break.
Yes.
So if you wrote spring clean my house, or
Okay.
you could say organize my closet, like what is the thing, Chrissy, that is most pressing for you?
Okay.
A
So this
domestic work.
coming weekend, I want to organize our playroom.
Okay, so
Yeah.
organize my playroom. Great. So now you've added it. So you wrote it in the search bar, you clicked on the plus sign, it is now a thing. So now
Yeah.
what you're going to do is at the end of that row, because it's added as an item, you're going to go over one to the magic wand. That
There
blue
we go.
wand. And you're going to click that magic wand. And it's going to take a moment, and we're all living in anticipation and like what's going to happen next. And it has literally developed a to-do list for you of the steps required to complete. So remove all the items, sort them into categories, purge any broken. But wait, if one of them was like, I don't really know what this means. So it says assign specific storage areas for each category. That's like maybe number 6 down or 5 down.
Yeah. Right
Go
here.
to the end of that row, click on the magic blue wand,
Okay.
and then, so click it, and then it will come up with a subtask list for that too. So this is the ultimate in access, the absolute ultimate in access. It is subtasked to the subtasks.
I mind blown. Because then I could do that again, right?
You could do
Like,
that again, but also let's get even like this is very, very sweet. If you go back to your original thing,
yeah,
organize our playroom.
yeah.
And at the end of that row, that the right-hand side of that row, and the drop-down menu, you will see estimate. So go ahead and click on estimate. And what it will do, this does take a moment. It will give you an estimate of time. And an estimate of time, it just takes a moment because it's
Okay.
calibrating, and it will let you know a window of time. So it might say, 12 hours or 6 hours, and then calibrate everything from there. But you can adjust that. So it's given you 1 day and 6 hours to do, but you're like, I actually only have 9 total hours over the weekend to do it. And then it will adjust it for you. And because we always want to be neuro inclusive, and for some people, it might be like, this is overwhelming detail. For others, it's like, don't make any assumptions. I want to know
Yeah.
all of it. That those chilies at the top, those 3 chilies that are resting there, you could have added more or fewer, and that would transpose the amount of detail it gives you. More chilies, more
Okay.
detail, fewer chilies, less detail.
So you could say, like, I want it spicier. I need more.
I need more. I need more
Yeah.
detail. I want even more steps.
Oh my goodness.
So you could put in learn to play the ukulele. You could put in how do I start my own podcast? You could put in how do I create a business presentation for whatever you were doing? Or you're a student, you're like, I need to study for Hamlet, and you could write that in there too. Learners can have a lot of fun because there's some other features within that Goblin Tools suite. Like you can make things sound fancier or take fancy things and make them sound less convoluted. You can share what ingredients you have in your fridge and it will come up with a recipe. Like it's very funny, the suite of things, but the magic to do option for me is so beautiful.
That just, again, like mind blown. This is, coupled with like the assignment calculators and the using AI to make tests, like this feels like where AI, because I think, AI in the bigger picture can make a lot of things worse out there, right? But this is where it actually can make our lives better and easier. And I could completely see actually both of my daughters at both age 15 and 7 using this as a breakdown for things like cleaning their room. Obviously, my younger one, who's the primary user of the playroom, will be helping me do this task. And this makes it easier for her to see my thinking of what I'm doing next.
Oh my gosh, the independence, your growing capability. And instead of being like, Mom, what do I do now? What do I do now? What do I do now? And what a sense of accomplishment. You get to, like, who doesn't love a good, cross out or check on a
Totally.
list? I will say that with the assignment calculator, what's additionally beautiful is that it's like it's not gate kept. You don't have to be a student of that particular institution.
Right.
And there are always links within the subsections, the subtasks. So if it uses the word brainstorm or generate an outline, and you're like, I don't remember how to do that, or no one taught me how to do that. That's cool. Follow it's all hyperlinked.
Yes.
And each institution presents different hyperlinks. So if you're like, I don't really love this one, oh, but this one is so good, give it a go. Another institution in Toronto where I am has way fewer assignment types, but you can sign up for email reminders. So if you need like a swift kick, some fire under your feet to be like, did you remember to write the outline? Did you generate a thesis? You'll get a little email reminder. I wouldn't do that if you're with anxiety or hypervigilance, but if you like need some momentum and reminding, it can be helpful.
Oh my goodness.
I'll say one last thing about AI.
Yeah.
If you and your older one sat down and looked at Notebook LM, your
Notebook LM.
Notebook LM is like right now in this moment, I think the best of the best for students. It's not easy to access if you're under 18, I believe, but with a parent is awesome. And instead of it searching the like garbage Google in like the universe of information, you give it the information. So for students who can upload PDFs from their courses, prior homework assignments, tests or quizzes that they've been given, any course material, anything at all, it will make you a study guide. It will make you practice questions. It will identify key topics, like it will synthesize your own information.
Stop
So
it.
yeah, you're setting the container.
Stop it.
For real. For real.
Okay, Deena, at the time that we are recording this, second
Yes.
half of this conversation, next week is literally finals week for my
Yep.
daughter.
Today.
And she
Get
is,
on Notebook LM today.
we will be, right when we are done here. That is exactly what we're going to be doing.
Yeah.
Now, one issue that has been a lifelong perpetual issue for me and is also turning up to be, seems like a fairly chronic issue for my kid as well, is one that you talk about in the book and that you just mentioned a moment ago. And the way that you talk about it in the book resonated with me because you mentioned, have you ever had a day where you have, like, for me as a business owner, where I have no meetings? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get so much done. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait. And then it's like 4 o'clock and I'm like, oh shit, I got nothing done. My workday ends in 2 hours. My childcare is over in 2 hours. And now I've got to cram an entire day's worth of stuff into 2 hours. And then I can have a different day where I have like three 15-minute blocks and a 1 hour block. And I'm like, bam, 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 right? I get so much done. So, I'm going to put the big label, which you do on this, of procrastination. And it even goes beyond that too, of just like this. And I know it's like, this feels overwhelming to start. So I'm going to do something else instead that's easier. And I'm going to do that. And I have long said, I'm my most brilliant when I'm under a time crunch, right? I did it as a lawyer. I do it in my current work. It sucks. It leads to like not enough sleep. I, how do we do better? You talk about this, but I want to like have you talk about it.
Yeah. The first thing that always comes to heart and mind is how normal. Like, who would want to work like when you could play? Who would want to generate ideas or sit through a boring task when there's pleasure and delight and ease, like with like at your fingertips. So, and also when you might fail or do really badly or feel a little embarrassed about quality of work or what you're struggling with. Like it's such a reasonable option.
Mhm.
The challenge is what we push off or delay now creates more discomfort. So we're uncomfortable now, but we just amplify, we turn up the volume on that discomfort by
Mhm.
delaying. So I'm a big fan of humanizing that experience. So who doesn't procrastinate? Who doesn't look for the beautiful days of no meetings in order to accomplish and then have it be like, I couldn't tell you really one thing I did today. Constraints in that situation energize the time. So when I work with students, students will say an identical sentence about studying.
Mhm.
I want a free day, and that's when I will start my studying. I need like 3 hours uninterrupted. And what's sort of funny is you could really add on to this, like where it's perfect lighting, where if they're at the library, like no one's making annoying sound, where they're, well fed, their tummy isn't grumbling, they're really well rested from the night before, they don't have worries. And then we have like a paradise, 3 hours to study.
Right.
Okay, first of all, that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And second, I guarantee you more than 50% of that time is going to be on YouTube, Netflix, on your phone.
Yes.
So it's not about trying to search out the swaths of uninterrupted time. In fact, those are kind of deadly. They really get in the way. So what we do look for and what so well serves procrastination are the small spots of time. There's more and more coming out about, it's like best practice is sort of an arrogant phrase, but about what really works well for learners and for all humans. It's just smaller bursts of time in between an appointment, in between a phone walk and talk, in between an already established meeting time or deadline. So what that looks like for students is, could I do 20 minutes of work before class or on the, 20-minute commute between things? I've got an appointment, I've got a dentist appointment. Can I do 15 minutes of reading? So making it small and sandwiched can be a very effective way to bridge into work and out of procrastination.
Okay.
Another thing is to think about the ordering of work. So, starting with the very hardest thing can often be very discouraging. Like your brain isn't getting going, or maybe you've had a huge long day of listening to lectures or being in the classroom. But starting with the very easiest might not also be the best strategy, because if you start with what's easier, we're going to only add in complexity as the evening goes on. And who wants to start the hardest task at 8 p.m. at night?
Right.
So I'm a big fan of starting with medium hard work that's like just within my doability range in this moment, and then moving to the most difficult because my gears are getting going, and ending the evening with something small. And really, one of the very best strategies is defining the task. If you wrote down studying, just in your agenda on your digital calendar, studying, there really is no more meaningless a phrase. Like it just doesn't mean anything.
Hmm.
If you wrote down essay, likewise, nothing.
Yeah.
How much do I do? How do I know when I'm done for today? But if you wrote 15 practice questions, 150 words, well, now there's a place to start. I'm not so like stuck in that, I'm too overwhelmed to start. I've broken it down by one of those tools, and I've given myself a very defined task, and I've sandwiched it in between tasks so that I'm like leaning into that energy, how you describe, like when when you have a deadline, great, so use the appointment as your deadline, use the phone call, the walk and talk as your deadline, a micro deadline. And let's stop thinking about work in hour or 2 hour or 3 hour chunks. That's horrible. Like, have you ever tried to read 100 pages in one go? Or
Yes.
write for 3 hours or study for 3 hours? I can assure you that the like last 2/3 of any of that are wildly ineffective. So how about
Okay.
one, right?
Yeah.
Half hour of work.
So in the year 2025, one of the things that is on my to-do list is to write a book. And I know, and I've got several of them brewing, so we'll see which one comes out first. But what I'm planning on doing is taking some time where, like, for I don't know weeks or months where that's really my primary task. But I have been thinking about this because I'm like, oh God, it would be so easy to be like, I'm taking, the next 3 months to write the book. And then we're at 2 months and 3 weeks and I haven't written anything. And I love the way that you're like, you know, let's break it. And I may, assignment calculator and this magic to do and all the things may become my best friends as I look at accomplishing this task that feels frankly pretty monumental.
Totally. So it's no surprise that Tim Urban's TED Talk on procrastination has millions and millions and millions of views. And he describes just that. Like
Yeah.
what happens if you have a year to do something or 3 months to do something, and that becomes 2 months and 1 month and 1 week and 2 days before.
Yeah.
So and it's my own TEDx is about this riffing in a different way. The book will always get short shrift, writing that book next to the easier to do's to cross off that list.
Yeah.
So in a way, we have to make it so back to proportion. Well, if you defined what writing the book was, there's something here. I don't know if it's the same in the States. NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, and it's like the
Oh,
month of November. And it's like if you could write a whatever 50,000 word book,
yep. Yep.
and the point is you write for a certain number of words each day for the month, 1,800 words a day. But what if you took that 1,800 words and you divided it into 2 months, and then it's 900 words a day? Or if you split that into 2 writing sessions a day, so you're writing 450 words in the earlier part of the day and 450 words at the end of the day, that is a very humane way to go about a project.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's helpful. Like, I mean, I can even show you how I've tracked the books that I've written. Is you really like, what is the word count work back? And it becomes 500 words a day. I don't have to write the whole thing in my mind right now. Talk about like stopping a person in their tracks.
Totally. Totally.
If you have on a to-do list, write book. I'm gonna write book today.
Yes.
We
Which,
want to touch that. Like we want to get started, but like write book, talk about the most overwhelming sentence. That's not a to-do that's gonna get done today.
no, no.
500, but write 500 words, write 300 words. That could get done today.
Okay. I have to tell you, Deena, when we've, started talking, obviously the focus of this was how do we help our kids? And now I'm like, well, good God, you just helped all of us because there isn't a single person listening to this that doesn't have some project out there, whether it is organizing the playroom, as we just looked up, or some major project at work, or a student, right, with whatever. And I just love it. And once again, like you and there's just so much richness in what you talk about. And, at the risk of going way too far into your calendar and mine and everyone listening, we're coming near the end of our time, but I want to ask you a question. And then I think what's becoming really clear to me is that you'll need to come back and join us again. If you could, for those parents who are like, man, these are amazing learning strategies, but how do I support my child in learning them, especially those of us with teenagers who, I love my teen, but still like, there's the eye rolls and the mom, I've got it, like stop, I can do it. What are some strategies that you recommend? And I know you write about this in your book, Raising Well Learners, that we can implement as the loving parents who want to help our kids feel successful. Not because, like, for me, it's not even that I'm like, you got to get into this college and you got to get these grades. It's like, I just don't want you to struggle.
I love that question so much. Oh, how to put into 2 minutes what's
I
a
know.
whole book and more. So
I
I'll do my
know.
best. I think first, humbly sharing that it's your challenge too. Gosh, it's hard to focus. Do you ever find that? Or, man, it's so easy to get distracted. I was supposed to start this, or I was supposed to wrap this up 20 minutes ago, and I'm really struggling to kind of stay on task. Does that ever happen to you? Like, I think if we're always the expert in every moment with our kids, it's a bit harder to, drop that armor and, let in some words of wisdom. But if you are a, fumbling, bumbling human alongside, yes, you do hold more years. Yes, you've got boatloads of experience, but to approach it with a bit of humility. And so that leads to the next one. The next suggestion is some kind of curiosity. Like, I just found this website. I heard this funny Canadian gal on a podcast, and she was recommending, this is hilarious. Magic to do. Check this out. What would happen? Look, let me put in my work. I've got this, briefing memo. I've got to write this report. I've got to do my year end. Like, lead with your own experimentation. If you get an eye roll, fine, but be like, do you think this would work for your history essay? Because that's tough. Like I'm glad that I've got my thing and not your history essay. Let's pop that in there.
Yeah.
Um, and so both of those, that's sort of humbly sharing that it's not dissimilar from a grown-up problem. And number two, being curious, like leading with the curiosity or enticing them in with you showing it there, not as I need to show you this resource, but check this is so whoa. It's prioritizing relationship. So if we are coming at, right, if we're coming at the learner going like action item, do this, you should feel ashamed about this, you should know how to do this. Well, like, oh my gosh, system shutdown. But if
Totally.
it's relationship as first principle, right? Like connection over the particular item, the particular assessment, then we're
Okay.
focusing on the right stuff.
I'm finding myself just giddy and like buzzing as you're talking because as you were talking, I was thinking to myself, this is relationship first parenting, which is exactly what you then called it. I think you actually use that phrase in your book as well. And I think this is why I love your work so much, is because it it is so consistent with positive discipline, which is everything that's my life's work. And it's, that, as you just said, like the idea of connection before correction and curiosity over, directives. And things that I talk with my clients and my, academy members about day in and day out. And so it just makes my heart sing when I hear other professionals in a completely different space talking about the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we are at our time. So, Deena, I think what we need to do is have you back on the podcast and really dig into that second piece more of what are the strategies that parents can use to support our learners. And then I'll just give everybody listening a little like seed. I'm going to plant a little seed here. But in the fall, I've already talked to Deena about this and gotten her thumbs up, go ahead. We are going to take these two books and I'm actually thinking a 4-part book club where we talk about the feel good learning first, and then we dive into raising well learners. So it's like the strategies for the kids and then how we do that. And Deena has agreed to come and answer questions and be a part of that. So I'm really excited about that. So if you're not on my mailing list and you've caught this podcast, make sure you get on the mailing list so that you can find out about that. And I want to make sure people know, Deena, where they can find you. Like you mentioned some great resources. You've got your books. We'll share those links. You talked about a learning and happiness course, and I know you do coaching. And like, where can people find you?
You're a very beautiful human. I can't tell you, like, as a person who practices ethical entrepreneurship, when people share in that collective uplift, I am so deeply moved. So thank you for asking. I am at a website called www.awakenedlearning.ca. I am on Instagram at Awakened Learning. I'm on LinkedIn if that's interesting to anyone. That's Deena Kara Shaffer. You can connect with me there. And I have these books. So I have Feel Good Learning, it's second edition, and Raising Well Learners. I also just today put out Feel Good Learning, the Academic Reflection Journal, which is a really sweet way for students to make note of what is working well, what is not, how they are as students. It's like a habit tracker plus, a feeling tracker, mood tracker, a like well learning tracker. I'm in talks with a publisher around a fourth book, so we'll see. More to come maybe in the fall. But those are some pretty good places to find me. And I will say, that my commitment to access, including financial access and equity around this, because you can one-on-ones, I have a whole team of learning strategists, but there are some families who cannot. So it's very beautiful to get tailored, personalized, that accountability meeting once a week. We encourage students to come for a full semester. They can encounter all the range of assignments and we can help them really like move through those. We can essentially make the A inevitable. But I'm always thinking about who can't access that. So I created something called the Essentials, Learning Strategies for Students. And it is talk about humble, a very humble session, 5 videos. They're on my website and it's like low cost, easy access. Do you want to have me teach it to you? Whatever time zone you're in, there it is. Like you can come to my parent sessions, I teach them, or you can just like have it right now. So I'm trying to create different pathways of access, and that it just means so much to me that people aren't left out. I don't want to be another barrier or
Yeah,
hurdle. Yeah.
I love that. And I try to do the same thing by having lots of different price points where people can get that support. Love, 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 love. We will make sure that all of those links are in the show notes. So if you're like driving in the car right now and you're like, oh my God, I can't, what was that website? Just go to the show notes on my website or on Apple Podcast, wherever you listen to your podcast. And they'll be there. And you can definitely count on me inviting Deena back. I don't know if I mentioned this at the outset, but Deena and I met through a woman, another lawyer who is in an online group for lawyers that I'm a part of, and she was posting about Deena's new book, and I was like, that sounds pretty amazing. And I just feel like I have met, this just such a fabulous person, and I'm so grateful the way the universe works and connected us. I know that the listeners are getting so much from this, and I can't wait to have you back, Deena.
Thank you so much. Like, may it come to some ease for the learner in your life. I really believe that learning can go and feel just so much better. That's my deep hope. So thank you so much for believing in this work.
Yeah, love it. All right, y'all. Was I right or was I right? Did you like walk away with your mind blown? Because I walked away with my mind blown. Like there were things I had no idea were out there. I had no idea could support my own child and myself, right? I just didn't know. And you don't know what you don't know. And so there's some just really phenomenal strategies here for parents, for adults. If you are a parent of a kiddo who struggles with executive functioning in any way, has ADHD, who like me is a masterclass Olympian caliber procrastinator, I am guessing that you walked away with something from this session. So I hope that you will track Deena down in all the places, including all the links that we talked about to her books, to her coursework, to her coaching. And as I said, we are going to be doing a book club around her books come fall of 2025. I'm going to actually get that on my year-long calendar now. And I will start just letting people know that you can block those dates out because it's out. I know that feels like a really long time away, but we all know how quickly time flies, especially as we get older. So I'm putting that in the fall. Keep your eyes, peeled. If for any reason you're not on my mailing list and you don't get my weekly emails, go to theheartfulparent.com and get on there, because that is where I will share information about this book club when it happens. In the meantime, obviously, tons of support that you can get from Deena and from me with parent coaching and the Heartful Parent Academy. We have you covered. So track Deena down, track me down, get the support that you need and that you deserve. We were never meant to parent or be a student in a silo, right? We were never meant to do that alone. On that note, I will sign off here and I will see you in our next episode of the Heartful Parent Podcast. Cheers, everybody. Bye-bye.